My name is Mark Frohnmeyer, founder and president of Arcimoto. This talk is about the big idea in transportation, getting to 20,352,000, which I'll explain in a bit. This talk was originally prepared for an event called EV Roadmap, Getting to a Million. And although the focus of that event was primarily on the near term, driving forward the adoption of electric vehicles in the United States to reach President Obama's goal of 1 million EVs on the road by 2015, the organizers asked me to use this presentation to pontificate on the long view. Where should we be aiming from a transportation perspective over the coming decades? First, a roadmap of the next 20 minutes. When you're traveling, it's helpful to know not just where you want to go, but where you are and how you got there. So I'll start with a quick articulation of an incontestable goal, then take a drive down memory lane, detouring only slightly to share what we're doing at Arcimoto before accelerating into a tour of 3 convergent future technologies that in combination will take us to the right destination. That destination, simply stated, our long-term goals as a culture must include a sustainable transportation system. When we talk about transportation electrification and radically increased efficiency, what we're really talking about is sustainability. A sustainable system is one that doesn't crater over time. The system we live with now is on an unsustainable trajectory, and the consequences of staying the course are dire. So how did we get here? Let's rewind back to the beginning. 1900, the dawn of the internal combustion age. You could tap some ground in Texas, oil geysered out, it was incredibly cheap, and there was no awareness at all of the external cost of torching all that energy. There were no cars on the road, and if a family could afford a car at all, it had to perform many functions, from pulling the plow to taking goods to market. The mass production techniques pioneered by Ford, as well as GM's creation of a national consumer credit agency in 1919, made cars affordable, and adoption skyrocketed. In 1919, there were just 6.7 million cars on the road in America, but by 1929, just 10 years later, this number had quadrupled to 27 million. The car promised freedom. It could carry a family comfortably for hundreds of miles and relied on a seemingly inexhaustible, domestically produced fuel for power. Manufacturers began to differentiate, not just on product capabilities, but also on styling, brand imagery, and advertising methodology. As the automobile ascended, mass transit declined. In the early part of the 20th century, many American cities had robust, electrified rail systems to efficiently move people around. By the 50s, partly due to economic trends and declining ridership, and partly due to direct action on the part of the automobile industry, most of these systems were decommissioned, tracks paved over, and trains scrapped. By 1970, there were more than 100 million cars and trucks on the road in America, and the negative consequences of this transportation mode were becoming more and more apparent. Even though we dedicated an ever-increasing amount of our civic landscape to the movement and warehousing of cars, individuals still commuted in freeway parking lots. And where we once domestically produced all of our transportation energy, by the early 1970s, domestic oil production had peaked, and the excess demand had to be supplied by the global marketplace. Despite the brief focus on efficiency brought about by the OPEC oil embargo in 1973, the American trend towards oversized vehicles continued, culminating in the invention of the sport utility vehicle. Even though the dominant vehicle usage pattern is 1 or 2 people traveling a relatively short distance with a relatively small amount of stuff, whether it's going to the grocery store for a gallon of milk, going to work, to school, or the movies, the dominant tool for the job is a 5,000-pound vehicle powered by gasoline. Which brings us to the present day. The peaking of domestic oil production in the 70s presaged the plateauing of global oil production in the last decade. And while global production has peaked and even now begins to decline, demand has not. Emerging economies, including China and India, have an increasing appetite for this diminishing resource. And despite the global economic slump, the price of a barrel of Brent crude oil is once again over $100. As distressing, the geopolitical and environmental consequences of the extraction and consumption of this precious resource are becoming more and more apparent, from erratic weather patterns and rising temperatures to catastrophic spills brought about by negligence and the ever-increasing difficulty of reaching the world's diminishing oil reserves. The sprawl-happy pave-the-earth pattern of transportation development has yielded more than 45 million miles of roads worldwide. That's almost half the distance from the Earth to the Sun. And the cost of even just maintaining that network to allow for the movement of oversized and inefficient vehicles is putting increased strain on already strapped public finances. What's needed clearly is a radically more efficient solution. If only someone had invented a truly sustainable transportation device, perhaps a device specifically designed to solve that simple, ordinary transportation problem. And in fact, somebody did invent such a device more than 100 years ago, and it's called a bicycle, the most efficient form of transportation humanity has ever created. Burrito-powered, calorie-burning, direct drive, full environmental engagement. Unfortunately, this fine invention doesn't actually work as a solution to the transportation crisis of today, inasmuch as it hasn't solved it. People still drive huge, polluting, inefficient cars, even though a radically more efficient, environmentally friendly option exists. But while the bicycle itself may not replace the car and solve the mass market transportation problem of today, perhaps it can point the way towards the automobile's next evolution. The World English Dictionary defines car as a road vehicle, typically with 4 wheels, powered by an internal combustion engine. Part of this definition is the focus of the EV Roadmap event, the transition to a radically more efficient drivetrain. Something like 3 times as energy efficient as a gas engine, the electric motor is quiet, clean, has instantly available torque, and can be powered by energy generated from renewable sources. After a century of failed efforts, the electric drive, the mother of all transportation no-brainers, is finally beginning to gain traction. But drivetrain is only half of the story. What is as interesting and relevant is innovation of the platform itself. You see, when you try to solve the full-size car problem with an electric drive, replacing the gas tank with batteries, you end up with a limited range product that carries a significantly higher price tag than a comparable gas-powered car. Like the bicycle, today's full-size EV is a solution for only a narrow band of the population, and thus not a solution for mass-market sustainable transportation. So I founded Arcimoto to help change the other part of that definition of car. Arcimoto is a clean transportation company currently developing an ultra-efficient electric vehicle for everyday driving. The name Arcimoto means literally Archetype I Drive, or I Drive the Future, and is the brand identity for the next generation of drivers. A little bit about me. I'm a lifelong transportation nerd with a background in software. I grew up programming an Apple II, became a professional game developer after graduating from Cal, and founded Arcimoto in 2007 after the sale of my first company, Garage Games. To quote the Chrysler commercial this slide apes, "It's as much about where it's from as who it's for." In our case, Arcimoto's values are rooted in a culture of sustainability, and the company has been bolstered by the local knowledge of a generation of electric vehicle futurists and heavy vehicle manufacturing experts. At Arcimoto, we're building a 3-wheeled vehicle aimed for the sweet spot in the gulf between the bicycle and the car, marrying the efficiency of the 2-wheeled form with the required capabilities of stable, enclosed vehicles. Rather than just replacing the internal combustion drivetrain, we've reformulated the vehicle platform itself. We're focusing not on the functionality of a full-size car, but instead on the functionality the majority of drivers actually need for daily driving. Our approach has been iterative, experimenting first with the basic vision of the product family, then establishing a vehicular footprint that is radically more environmentally efficient than cars on the road today, yet maintains a stable, familiar ride experience. With the footprint established, we built our first concept car, the Pulse, and used it to launch the Arcimoto brand into public awareness. Finally, we engineered a unique new vehicle platform that will be best in class, both for ride quality and efficiency. That was a year ago. Development through those first 4 generations was then coalesced into a single prototype concept called the SRK, our 5th generation and first product prototype. The partially enclosed base model can be upgraded with several full enclosure options for different use cases. After we put the 5th generation SRK product prototype on the road in April, we took it to California on a publicity tour. While we were there, we had a chance to put Stana Katic, one of the lead actors on ABC's Castle, in the driver's seat. This video chronicles her experience.
All right, so test drive, how did you feel?
Awesome, Dave. It's so fun. It caught everybody's eye too. I went through a gas station just because I could and I didn't have to stop, so that was awesome. And all the cars that were there, like one person leaned out the window and said, "That's tight," and that's kind of what I got all the way around.
It's cool, right? Thank you. It's electric. I don't even need to stop here.
It's fun. It's like a mix between a safe motorcycle and a sports car. Do you know what I mean? It feels really, really exciting.
Throughout the 6th generation of development, the engineering team has continued to refine every aspect of the vehicle experience, shaving weight, improving efficiency, buildability, and safety. We've dropped hundreds of pounds, lowered the center of gravity, and have fine-tuned the platform to prepare for significant improvements in the shapeliness and sleekness of the body. We're now within days of locking down the Generation 6 Pilot Mule for build. The Generation 6 Pilot fleet will represent Arcimoto's transition from a pure prototyping and design shop towards a full vehicle production venture. So what's next? Mass transit, for decades relegated to decommissioning and disrepair, is making a big comeback. Portland's development of the MAX light rail and streetcar are shining examples of this trend. Some futurists point to ideas like the one on the screen, Personal Rapid Transit, or PRT, as appropriate next-generation transit solutions. Unfortunately, the implementation cost of new train or PRT systems, both in terms of infrastructure and operation, are significant, making broad systemic change a difficult and long-term proposition. At the same time, America's decades-long affair with the automobile is losing its shine. As public awareness of the global costs of our transportation paradigm increase, the allure of the car as an extension of persona has begun to wane. This trend is accelerated by the increasing traction of vehicle sharing services like Zipcar. Rather than having to own a pickup truck to get a yard of dirt, an SUV to go skiing, and a Prius to drive to Seattle, people can simply, efficiently, and affordably use the right vehicular tool for the job. And Zipcar is just the beginning. Zipcar's challenge is that they have to own all the cars and place them where they think they'll be well utilized. What really gets me excited is GetAround. This new service, recently launched in the Bay Area and coming soon to the Northwest, is great. Instead of GetAround owning a fleet of cars that they have to pay for and maintain, they instead make it possible for customers to rent vehicles from each other. After more than a decade of operation, Zipcar has hundreds of vehicles to choose from in the Bay Area alone. 2 months after launch, GetAround had more than 5,000. With the touch of a button on your smartphone, you can rent, by the hour, a vehicle of your choice, and the owner can rest easy knowing that the vehicle is fully insured while you do. But as cool as GetAround is, it pales in comparison to what's next. What's next is a technology I've been dreaming about for a decade, and it's almost ready for prime time. This new technology, in combination with the next generation of ultra-efficient electric vehicle platforms and mobile software applications, has the potential to radically disrupt transportation as we know it, and move us swiftly in the direction of a sustainable transportation system.
When I was 18 years old, I lost my best friend in a car accident. He didn't pay attention just for a fraction of a second. In the United States, driver distraction causes about 30,000 plus deaths every year. It's about 1 million people worldwide. The Google Self-Driving Car project tries to fix this. The concept is utterly simple. You get into your car, you tell it where you want to go, and it just gets you there. And you are free to do something else. To make this technology happen, we developed a complete new way of making cars smart. We equipped them with lasers and cameras and radars to fully understand the situation around them and make careful calculations what to do next so as to drive just like a human driver. The car is smart enough to blend in just like a human being, and it's been accident-free. I can't bring my friend Harald back to life with this technology, but I believe he has the potential to make a technology that's more impactful than anything else in the past 50 years of transportation.
So imagine for a moment a fleet of self-driving, ultra-efficient electric vehicles driving around the city, available at the touch of a button on your phone. You could be too young or too old or too drunk to drive. No problem. It will be a personal rapid transit system that interfaces flawlessly with the existing system we have today. No new infrastructure, and it can be phased in over time as it proves out on the road. And once you get a sizable number of these vehicles on the road, really cool stuff starts to happen. The autonomous car can communicate with the vehicles around it. Self-organizing trains of cars will radically reduce gridlock as they accelerate and brake together. When you get dropped off at the store, the vehicle you exit can pick up someone who is just leaving. As I close, I'll leave you with some cowboy math. A recent study in Paris found that on average cars are unused 92% of the time. 92% of the time, the car is just sitting there, parked. If you take the 254.4 million registered passenger cars on the road and multiply by an assumed utilization of 8%, you'd need 20,352,000 autonomous transporters to provide an equivalent level of service to what we have today in the United States, minus the gridlock, minus the accidents, at a radically supersized level of environmental efficiency. To put this number into perspective, it's less than double the number of new passenger vehicles that were sold in the US just last year. So if we really want to get serious about solving this problem set, all that's required is the will. What will this system look like in terms of cost? Assuming a cost of $20,000 per vehicle, nationwide sustainable PRT clocks in at just over $400 billion in capital costs, not counting the maintenance and charging infrastructure. To put that number into perspective, that's less than 2 years of current consumer US spend on gasoline, and well south of the costs of recent bank bailouts, not to mention the exorbitant cost in terms of dollars and lives of the military conflicts required to sustain our appetite for fossil fuel. A sustainable personal transportation system will be a win, not only from economic, geopolitical, and environmental standpoints, but from the perspective of basic civic livability as well. Significant portions of the massive quantity of asphalt that we now dedicate to the movement and warehousing of cars will be reclaimed, turning parking lots into parks, and the pollution, noise, and the long-term planetary livability risk of our current paradigm will disappear. For all the grave challenges we face in the transportation landscape, we are on the cusp of some of the most exciting developments in vehicles the world has ever seen. Rock and roll.